Hello and welcome to this video. It's been a while. I'm really looking forward to sharing with you this beautiful conversation that I had with Elif Gokcigdem, who is doing incredible, groundbreaking work in the realms of empathy and art sharing and healing, I believe. So, welcome if you're new here, and welcome back if you're not. My name is Tumí. I am a dancer, a poet, and a medical doctor, holistic minded. I make dances for individuals and now for art spaces, conscious art spaces, museums and galleries. And so this conversation is right aligned with that. And I think no matter what you do, if you resonate with the feeling of a need for greater empathy and empathy building and nurturing in our world, I think you'll love this conversation. Enjoy. Today, I have the honor of sitting with Elif Gokcigdem, who I have had the pleasure of knowing now, I think for a little bit less than a year. And I want to read you a little bit about Elif before she starts speaking, just to talk to you about how important this conversation around empathy is. So I'm going to read. I'm looking down on my notes to make sure I get everything right. Dr. Elif Gokcigdem is a pioneer in empathy building through museums. And she is the founding president of Empathy Building Through Museums Initiative, which later became ONE, Organization of Networks for Empathy. She's the editor of Fostering Empathy Through Museums and Designing for Empathy, Perspectives on the Museum Experience. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We're going to get into it. Why talk about empathy? And for me, why empathy is incredible medicine and needed medicine right now, and has never been such an important topic, I believe, in our history. Elif, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to our conversation. It's always a joy speaking with you.
I was connected to you through a mutual friend. And just to give any of you backstory who do not know this and who are new to this channel, welcome. I am a physician, I'm a dancer, and I'm a poet, and I create healing poem dances, which are dances that are crafted from my poetry as well as my expertise as a medical doctor, that I then perform to instigate the healing process of the viewer. And in the past several months, my work has now shifted to being exhibited in art spaces, museums, galleries. Before that, I was doing live performances and I was creating dances for individuals as part of their healing work with me, holistic healthcare healing work with me. But I felt really called to start sharing these dances in museum spaces as exhibitions of the video and film of these dances. And a wonderful mentor and friend of mine in New York City said, speak to Elif. And she gave me Elif's contact. And I started doing some research on this incredible woman and watched some of your interviews, Elif, and was blown away because you put to words something that was within me about art that I had felt for such a long time. When I was a resident physician in New York City and I'd work 48 hours, at a time, and I'd come out of the hospital sleep deprived and emotionally shattered many times, to be honest, after seeing death and dying and just the human cruelty, really, coming in the form of people coming in with dis-ease. I would go to a gallery. I would go to a museum. If I didn't go to my dance class because I was too tired, I would go to an art space because there, in that quiet, surrounded by that beauty, I felt a sense of peace and wholeness. And Elif, I felt that your work really speaks to how art spaces can create such a space of healing. And as I said, when I heard you speak, when I read the words you'd written, it really felt like it touched exactly that which what I was feeling and also spoke to the work I'm now doing with my dances. And that brings me to my first question for you, which is I'm so curious to know, how did you get here? How did you get to this idea, this vision of designing for empathy? And specifically, if you're able to, if you feel comfortable to share, what in your personal story uh, maybe shifted you towards this incredible life mission you have been living and sharing out?
Thank you very much for also sharing your experience with museums and art spaces. And so my journey began. I mean, yes, I did study history of art and museum studies, and then I worked at a corporation for 26 years. And for the last 2 years, I left my job, and I'm 100% focusing on empathy building through museums and creating networks for empathy around the world, creating spaces for empathy building. My journey began with a personal lived experience that I couldn't put in words for a very long time. And it was such a beautiful, awe-induced and awe-inspiring experience that I lacked the words for, basically. I didn't have any words or any framework within which I could logically describe what took place, what I experienced. Yet I wanted to share it. You know, it was just so beautiful. I knew that I could not keep this to myself, and which would have been the logical thing because I didn't have the words. I was also afraid that people might think that I was going crazy or something. You know that, what's happening with her. And but that those questions quickly became just nothing. And my main desire was to be able to share this experience one day with my own children. And how would I explain to them that, life is not as just we see with our eyes and what we experience with our bodies, but it is also what we can feel and see through the eye of our hearts, and how we can know at a deeper level than just our intellect. And and um and these are the words that came many years later, to be honest with you. I was just awestruck, and I couldn't just even talk to anybody for a couple of years, although I did do much reading. So I grew up in Istanbul, Turkey, and my family, my upbringing was what might some people call that it was like a Sufi understanding of the religion of Islam. And although we didn't call it that, it was just our religion and how my parents and grandparents, lived their lives. And I consistently observed and witnessed their behavior with that would not contradict to something that they say. They would say something, they would give an advice, and then I would witness somehow that they also live to that advice themselves.
Mm.
So it was a constantly, without really an intentional education, but just like being in that environment. So that's to say, how my worldview was shaped, because I also understood later on, trying to describe this experience and how the kinds of terms that I would use to describe it, also have a lot to do with my own worldview, how I was brought up. And the closest thing that I could explain this in words was the word empathy, feeling our sort of instinctive ability to feel like another. But in this case, I felt more like a oneness with all the being, all like the being was one, and I was one with it, and there was no other. And but ironically, empathy has this um, sort of description where you have to have an other to empathize with because there has to be a transaction. And it is true in maybe in a physiological context, but then there's like why are we wired for that? Is it just to design better products or improve our skills in design thinking or innovate new technologies or new systems? What about our humanness? Why do we have that tool embedded in us? What does it do to our becoming a full human being? Not just like a rock or,
Mm,
or a vegetable, which are honorable in their own rights as beings. But as human beings, we have other faculties that we are responsible for. So how can we basically develop those qualities and faculties to become better human beings? And in all this wide context, the word that I could come up with was empathy, the closest thing. And empathy to me, then, it wasn't really just it wasn't a goal. It wasn't the goal of this journey. Once I could, figure out how it made sense in this context, I knew that it was a foundational element upon which we should build. So it is only the bare minimum, in a way, to in our sense of becoming fully human, so that we can actually experience more subtle and nuanced and more sophisticated ways to empathy. And in my view, in my lived experience and explorations, what they taught me was that they actually can enable any individual, any human being to feel in communion with existence as if there is no other, because there is really no other, but our bodies and the way we feel the world and the universe around us make it very difficult for us to understand that with our eyes and with our senses. It requires the work of the heart and cleaning the perception of the heart so that we can see clearly and be open to those other kinds of perceiving the world and ourselves, the world in ourselves and around us. And I know I talk too much, I apologize, but there's no really short way of explaining it. So that's how it all began basically. And I said, like I should learn more about, how empathy is defined and because the way in my upbringing I could see that empathy is not really about duality or the two getting along. It was about oneness. It is always about oneness. But it took me literally 20 years of experiential learning and trying to design those experiences and coming up with, names for those qualities where, such experiences occur in some spaces and research into those spaces and what brings them to life and energize them. Now I'm able to say that finally that empathy is about oneness. It's a tool for a human being to feel one with the universe. And once a human being feels one with the universe, as if there's no other, and because there's no other, our our interactions, our manners, and our manners of behavior towards what we might consider as the other change. We tend to harmonize, and we tend to become more compassionate and more loving, and we tend to develop a perception of the world where we start seeing the beauty more, and the beauty feeds that sense of empathy and oneness and love, and all this. Again, what is the outermost, like the topmost goal in all this is, I think, to reach peace in our heart and peace in our world.
that's extremely powerful. And there was a lot of that that really touched me. when you talked also about seeing family members in your upbringing, that what they would say was aligned, if I understood correctly, with what they would do. And I remember
Yes.
the word that came to me was integrity.
Mm,
Integrity. That your values are lining up with your actions. And I've thought a lot about integrity in the past several months and how I feel for me, how integrity can be very much peace bringing to oneself, um, and can be actually a form of self empathy. Because I think actually when you are saying one thing, and I encounter this a lot when I work with people who are wanting to achieve certain health goals, and they have this, okay, I want to do this. I want to um, be this healthy, but then their actions are doing something else. It can form a lot of discordance and a poor self esteem actually in the being. And as you were speaking about empathy and oneness, I remember thinking what came to me was that's so interesting in science. Integrity is not actually this idea of being aligned with values. Integrity is about wholeness. It's about, is the cell wall, does it have integrity? Is it in, is it continuous? Is
mhm,
it is it one? And so it
mm.
was so beautiful for me how you brought this idea of integrity, for me, oneness and empathy all together. And I'm very curious. You started at the end of this what you were sharing to talk about peace and beauty, and I want to go there more. I'm curious with your art history background and now knowing the work you're doing, how did you then move from these beautiful concepts? Why museums? Why did you go there, and how did you bring that concept into the art space world?
Yeah, I mean, once I realized that this was such a fundamental human experience, it was a phenomenon that, we really needed to look into more, and not just from one perspective, but through, the perspective of multiple disciplines. But I had to start somewhere, right? I had to start somewhere, and I said, it's basically this understanding of what empathy can be potentially because of a lived experience. I was sort of like backtracking my way to an ordinary human experience, I would say, like everyday life, everyday experience of how we go around the world. But I had lived this like extraordinary experience, and so I was trying to find a bridge, in terms of concepts, terms, examples, and um, and it was really, really sort of like overwhelming for a while, until I decided that like I can no longer sit on this as this like spiritual joy that I found clearly I was gifted with. I didn't find it; it found me somehow. But it made me think that if it found me, it is out there, to be found by many other people. So, and I know a little bit about, experience design, exhibition design, experiential learning from my education in the museum studies and art history, which is all about finding meaning and making meaning and understanding the nuances of meaning, based on like multiple perspectives. For example, if there's this like beautiful ceramic cup, what does it mean to the one who makes the pot, who decorates it, who uses it, who sells it, and what happens after it breaks, and
Mm,
what is the experience of the clay and the water, what is that all about? What are they really going through that, and their experience of becoming a pot, that's something useful that people hold. So it is not just my experience of this beautiful ceramic. An awareness of this I gained through my education in art history, that you should never look at one object from a single perspective. You should always know that there are multiple ways of seeing the same thing, and it gives an individual, ideally, some humbleness and humility to know that there are. I may be aware of a few other perspectives, but certainly not all of the perspectives, and so it gives a room to be sort of like a humble, in my opinion, of what I see, I consider as the reality, or what is standing in front of me. So I said, like, all those things sort of made sense to me, and I said, if there's a way to show this through an experience, and I, at the same time, I realized that this is, there are many books about empathy. Everybody talks increasingly about how, we lack empathy in our world and how it is important. But there's really not enough investment in really intentionally designing for empathy to occur naturally, because it's a natural phenomena. It is just waiting for us to create those spaces and environments within which the ingredients of what I call the alchemy of empathy can take place, because it's not just, science, it's not just art, it's not just spirituality, it is a combination of all and more, plus more. And but I said I had to start somewhere. I can't be a perfectionist, like as an somebody in academia, or like a PhD student. You have to stick with the resources that you have. But what if that there's something out there that nobody really looked at, and it is the right time? It is manifesting itself through ordinary folks like myself and many others, that it is wanting to be known. And so what can I do as Elif, with what the limited knowledge that I have, to get to know it, and to be able to have the words to start describing it, to have the words to, to explain it to others, so that I can learn from their experience, their lived human experience, what it is like for them. And that's how this sort of grew. It was just like a very stubborn, crazy Turk to, like, I guess I just have to find out more about this, and I just had to take the first step, and basically leave perfectionism out the door.
Beautiful. Hi there, just popping back in. I really hope you're enjoying the conversation Elif and I are having so far. If you are, please consider subscribing, at least hitting the like button, and sharing the video with anyone you think might benefit. I don't monetize any of my videos on YouTube. And so, because of the absence of ads, I don't receive monetary compensation for being on this channel. And so, this channel, this work that I'm doing here is self funded. And so, you can support this effort by, again, subscribing, liking, and sharing. Thank you. Oh, that's leave perfectionism. What happened when you did that? When you left perfectionism out the door, when you just
Woo!
went through?
Freedom. Freedom to be,
Hmm.
freedom to really, like, fully embrace my own qualities that I did not know that they existed, like, I never expressed creativity, or never thought that, oh, I'm a creative person, or I can do this, I can do that. But once you start doing it, you're actually doing it. You don't have to convince anybody. You just have to keep doing what you believe, what comes to your heart. And that gives its own power, and own, it definitely has its own, sort of force, that just gives one complete trust in, in what might come next, because there's no shame in, like, there's no failure in this. It's a path. It's a path. You can just keep going and exploring it. And um, because I already believe in oneness, and I experience it with, an experience, I know that all paths are going to the same place, or coming from the same place, even though they might look extremely different and, uh, diverse.
A lot of the people who I think are drawn to my work and to this channel are people who are very creative minded. Either they themselves are artists, or they're art makers, or they're even curators. And there are people who also really believe or are drawn to holistic healing. And I'm curious to know what you now, having done that, this incredible work and uncovered your own creative power, what does it look like to be in an art space that has designed for empathy versus one who maybe that idea or those concepts are not maybe as prioritized? Just to
Yeah,
ground it a little bit for people who are
yeah,
thinking, what does this look like?
yeah. Where I think, right now, to be honest, I don't think it exists
Mm,
fully. There are experiments around it, and there are, ways of, describing it, and building a community, intentional community around it, so we can collaborate and exchange notes and ideas about what this can look like, and it will look different in each space because the context will be different. And empathy building is not only for art or art spaces. Empathy building is a way of looking at the other, where it could be art, it could be a rock, it could be a specimen, it could be, I don't know, a physical phenomena like light, or I don't know, earthquakes, or anything like that, a concept, anything that we can call as the other outside our physical embodied existence. And the goal is to be able to develop ways of perception where, by looking and trying to understand the other, I'm actually learning about myself,
mm,
my ego, and its stages of development of, its access to the heart, the eye of the heart, and what happens when ego takes the hold and just runs with, whatever it has, which can be very impulsive and, always wants to be at the center, and and it creates selfishness naturally. And but that's all it knows, and it's not its fault. But as human beings, if we can witness that, the behavior of the ego as, oh, ego does this, but because I can witness it, I can also perhaps control it. So I have a choice to attempt to control it and bring it to more of a sort of a heart-centered way of existence. And so going back to your question, any other is important. Any other can be used um, as a mirror to within which we can view ourselves, to learn about our own perception, our own biases, the way we look at the world, the way we make our choices, and we can do this in private. So these are empathy building experiences, are sort of social, and what in my experience, my description of empathy building is, um, it has to have a social and contemplative inquiry at the same time. So while you're in the social, like with a lot of people, let's say looking at in an art gallery, for example, you are looking at an art piece, but there are some prompts that are making me actually think about myself. But at the same time, everybody is going through this shared experience. So I can also subtly see, I have this triple awareness where I can see myself, my inner world, my emotions, my reactions, my biases, thoughts, or whatever is going on internally that nobody else sees. And then I can see my actions, my outside behavior. And then I can see others outside experience, right? Like how they are behaving. But that just that experience tells me that they're also going through something internal at the same time, just like I'm going through. So instantaneously you expand the area of perception beyond just me, myself, and my ego, what I want from this piece or anything like that. But your experience is a collective social experience. At the same time, it's a very private experience because only I can realize or pay attention to those nuances if I choose to do so, and only I can work on them if I choose to do so. So uh, and ultimately it is, and everybody else is feeling the same. And this is not just like a the matter of one museum experience, one gallery experience, or one workshop. The goal in empathy building is like creating these spaces and experiences more and more in multitudes of places and multitudes of platforms, spaces, different contexts. Let's say in natural history museums, in children's museums, in arts museums, in performing arts centers, in schools, in public parks, in national parks, where we know that we develop a culture that we are aware of our perception, our own biases, and we know that we can do some work to expand our sense of self beyond our definitions of ego, so that myself knows that like there are many other selves are going through the same thing, and we are all in the same boat, and I can actually then empathize with them. That's where the empathy comes in, right? It's a human experience. We're all going through the same thing. If I expand my sense of the self, that means that I can also include others' experiences as if my own, although it is physiologically, of course, I will never be able to experience exactly what another is experiencing or has experienced, but the knowledge that like it is similar is enough, and it says sort of like the foundational way where we can meet, as the common denominator.
As you were speaking, I was just, um, what was coming to me is I feel like we're getting to the edge of something, which it might be something that we assume, which is that this is important. But I don't think we've actually spoken. And I would love to hear your words of why does this matter? Why is empathy important in our day, in this time now? Why is designing for empathy? Why is this an important uh,
Yeah,
process to be going through?
yeah. I mean, I think there are so many ways, different ways of answering this. But from my perspective, I feel my existence on this planet as my chance to feel my humanness. And the more I explore my heart and what my heart can perceive and how I can empathize to a degree that, there's really no longer an other, and I can feel sort of a sense of communion with the matter, animate and inanimate beings around me. It tells me that there's so much to learn about my own humanness, then this lifetime may not ever be enough, and this may be an answer that's, you know, just for me, that this is how I feel. But I know that, this type of worldview is important. Like, for example, I cannot speak for anybody else, but I would love my children to know that this type of worldview exists. There are people who view the world this way, and they have ways of living with harmony with themselves and with each other and with the nature, as because we are nature and nature is us. Whatever we are doing to the other, we are actually doing to ourselves,
Mhm.
and we may not realize it immediately, but that's what is happening. And there's really not a way that I know to show people like in two pictures, like before or after or anything like that. But I think we deep down we all know that this is, um, that we are all related to each other somehow, and exploring and deepening in these relationships are healthy and important, and can create a more cohesive existence with um, other humans that may not look like us, that may not believe the same things as us, but they're also human beings, and they're also serving a purpose in this world, as part of this whole. and the whole goal is to find, to become whole,
Mm.
to feel one with all parts of that whole, that we sadly we each have the capacity to be this way or that way. So it is not about developing a moral judgment, or it's not about judging others. It's to me, my view and my path is basically learning about my own humanness so that I can understand other human beings, and the creation better. Um,
That's a beautiful answer. And I think what I also love about your answer is an invitation for people really to define for themselves um, what empathy is and why it's important. That we can have maybe these ideas and it might be, oh, so seemingly obvious. Look at the cruelty being done to each other around the world. Look at injustice to other beings, um, et cetera, et cetera. But I think until it gets a personal exploration, that might not really land. And so I really loved your answer for its nuanced, personal, really like individual, like what is this for me? And I think it's an invitation for all of us to look at that. What does empathy mean for me? Why is it important for me?
I think I agree because, I mean, especially in this time where there's a clear attack on diversity, like the word diversity or the word empathy, and compassion, as if these things are human-made constructs. These are not human-made things. These are the essence of the universe. These are sacred qualities of the universe that we live in, that we are. So this is not up to us to eliminate them from the dictionary or from our institutions. They're not going away just because, we stop using them. But there's a danger. There's a danger because if we stop using them, if we stop, blurring our vision of them, there's a danger that the eye of our heart can become blind, eventually,
Mm,
that it forgets those concepts. I mean, it will always be there. It is not going away. But there's a danger of us forgetting about that. And forgetting about that is basically cutting our own arms and legs to this, ancient human wisdom that brought us here, that we have available to us today. And this means that ignoring them means that we are just cutting our lifelines
mm,
for no reason
mm,
other than other than a really malicious reason or intention, in the way that, yeah, let's somebody decided, me, oh, let's kill humanness. We don't need humans who can pay attention to love and beauty and empathy and compassion. Let's turn them into our, attention. Like we can drive their attention with whatever we give to them. They'll be busy with that. They like that anyway. We'll just give more. And what does that do to our humanness? What does it do to a human heart? It is our responsibility to keep our heart clean, and as clean and as dust free as
mm,
possible.
mm,
Uh, and so there's that danger. It's not entirely, like it is my choice, or uh, um, it's rather a battle. It's a serious battle,
mm.
challenge to keep doing the work, this type of work in ourselves, and in our whatever our context is, in museums, in whatever
Yeah.
businesses.
One thing I loved about what you shared around empathy just now, and you've spoken about throughout our conversation, is this understanding. It's back to the oneness principle that um, if we lack empathy, if we try to stamp out diversity, again, good luck with that. We actually are stamping out our own heart. It's like eating our own selves in a way. And it reminds me of one of my favorite poets and poem. You're in the land of Turkey, and Rumi. Um, I know spent a lot of time there in Turkey. And the poem, The Guest House, a
Yeah.
beautiful poem. And I think towards the end, he writes, be grateful for whoever comes. Be grateful for whoever comes because they have been sent as a guide from beyond. And so this concept that even if they may seem malicious, they may seem so different from you. I think part of what can give us this illusion of separation is the judgment. Like this person is a that person is a that. I want nothing to do with this. But to understand that each and every one of them, um, whatever labels have been put on them, that they are guides for we're guides for one another, that we're really guides for one another, taking each other home if we allow ourselves to be that for each other. And
Yes.
that is empathy. That is understanding that, you know, you are here, I am here for you, you are here for me, even though we may not understand or see that.
Exactly, exactly. You said it so beautifully, and that reminded me of this the story that my father used to tell me. And so soon after this experience that I mentioned in the beginning of our conversation, I went through many phases, and I wanted to stop everything, like leave my job, like just go out in the world and do this, whatever, which I didn't know what that was. But and for the first time in my life, I hired a life coach
Mm.
to just like to be able to talk and like what are some of my options? What can I do? And she was just like the most wonderful person who just gave me the space, a lot of time, like our first session. And we had only one session. We became friends afterwards, but she allowed me to speak maybe like 2 or 3 hours,
Mm.
asking all the right questions. And the more she, sort of invited me to be a little bit more concrete. So what does this mean? What does this look like? A little bit like what you just did in the beginning. Like how would you like describe this? And sometimes this is difficult for me to make like give one example because it is just happening now. There are elements of it everywhere, but it is not just like, oh, it looks like this. It is not there yet. I mean, and it is in some ways. But anyway, but so I kept talking, and then she said, yeah, 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 and at the end of our conversation she said, well, Elif, you're clearly very passionate about this idea, and I think I understand what you're trying to do, but what would be really helpful is if you can turn this into a story format, but not longer than like 500 words, like 3 hour conversation. And like I don't even have the words to describe. That's why I'm talking for so long, because I don't have the vocabulary to describe it and the life experience to describe it. Yet I know that it is there. So I'm like keeping like just keep talking. And she said, yeah, just like create a one pager, make a story, make it a story, make it one page and see what happens next.
Mm.
I was like, oh, okay. And I purchased my first laptop, created my first Gmail account, outside my, business, and started this document. It was a Christmas break, and I worked nonstop on like trying to create this story that is only one page. And at the end, everything brought me back to the story that my father used to tell me, like, my upbringing, how I was brought up, how I came to see the world. That is so important. And I came to see the world in a way, but not everyone does. Even my own children, their context is different. How can I create those spaces and experiences where everyone can feel that thing? And the story was my father, we had this beautiful garden on a small island in the Marmara Sea, and he loved to plant all kinds of vegetables and fruit trees, like all different kinds in the small garden. And his best, like favorite time was to smoke a cigarette and have like a Turkish coffee and just watch his garden, and he used to always talk and tell me stories. And he said, just out of the blue, like I'm sitting there and he's sitting there and he says, "Look, my daughter, look, like look at this garden, look at the plants." And I'm looking at the garden. Look, like there's hot peppers, there's sweet peppers, there's, cherry trees, there's sour cherry trees, there's cucumbers, which really don't taste like anything. They go with anything and everything, like whatever you put in, they get that flavor. And then there's like mulberries, there's like white mulberries, dark mulberries, like all kinds of figs and plums and and he said, If there wasn't a hot pepper, you wouldn't know what a sweet pepper tasted like.
Mm,
If there wasn't a sour cherry, you wouldn't know what a sweet cherry tasted like. So that was like, it was just a story that he used to tell me. And I was like, yes, exactly. Like we have to have two to get to know the one, our own oneness. But you have to go from the two because that's how we are wired.
yeah.
So it could be, if it could be a, a hot pepper or a cucumber, it could be an art object. It is a way of looking at the world and learning to look at the world in a way that there is more than just what we see, and we each and everything around us are intrinsically connected, inseparably connected as one. We are not even parts. Parts could mean that you can just take them apart like the pieces of a puzzle. This is like a, like the sea or a lake. There's many water drops, but they are all one lake at the same time as there are also drops. And so yeah, sorry, again, I like went to different places maybe, but yeah.
No, I love that story. I'm just in visualizing that garden right now, and what a beautiful and sensorial landing of that idea of our unique beauty and how our unique beauty brings us to our connection with one another. And you do this work so powerfully. I'd love for you to share, if you're open, about the summit that you offer around designing for empathy. What is that? How did you start doing that? And what does that look like? What is your vision for that? And maybe more practically, where, give us a little bit more information about it this year, which I'm so grateful to be um, being there, to be a part of it this year, and to be performing, presenting there this year.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really so grateful that you'll be a part of that experience. And so the summit idea came after. So when I started doing this work, I said, okay, I'm an art historian. I know a little bit about museums, and let me start there. And soon after, I went to this museums conference as part of my corporate job. It had nothing to do with museums, a little bit with arts and culture, but nothing like what I'm doing now. And and I found this, there was this publisher had a stand with like many books on museums, and I said, "Do you have any books on museums and empathy?" And he said, "Not that I know of, no, we don't." And I said, "Do you have anything on like what you might call empathy building?" And he said, "No, what do you mean by that?" So I tried to explain to him this like experiential learning of empathy and to widen your sense of the self, one's sense of the self through empathy building. And he said, "Oh, that sounds interesting, why don't you write a proposal?" I said, "Really?" Said, "Yeah, like write a proposal and see where it goes." And I did, because I had to, like I had really I'd never done anything like that before, but I just had to. I had to see what could be done. And like not doing it was not an option,
Mhm.
even though I could have miserably, failed, which whatever, it wouldn't be a failure again to me because there was no such thing, I just had to try. And so I reached out to some colleagues, some friends, in the field, and they all found the question very, intriguing. And so I asked them, if certain questions, and I created a framework for this book. It was an edited volume where, from children's museums, art, science, civil rights, history museums, colleagues contributed, sharing their idea of what empathy looks like in their own context and what empathy building might look like. So this book came out in 2016. And right after that, I was already like starting to like do another work, like another collaborative work about designing for empathy. So now we know how it looks like in museums. What do we need to know to intentionally design and create those spaces in museums or experiences? And in between the two projects, I received this invitation from His Holiness the Dalai Lama's office through a person who was familiar with their work and with my work, and he said, "Would you like to write a proposal?" My, so if
Oh.
anybody asks you to write a proposal, do it. Like no, don't think twice. And I said, yeah, like if that would be great because then I could bring more diversity around this idea from different disciplines. You know,
Mm.
if we did this, if we successfully planted these seeds in museums, who would benefit in society? Which professions? Judiciary, technology, health. So I got an invitation, and I put together a group of nearly 30 people, all from different uh, disciplines, different professions, some museums, but not all of them. And we went to visit His Holiness in Dharamsala, India in 2018. And we had this almost like 5 days long, in addition to our audience with him, we had workshops and sightseeing and long discussions, and that was the very first summit. And after that, we said, like, what do we do next? And one participant said, we should just make sure that we do this every year, and it has to be like at least 3 days of an exchange of ideas, workshops, and that's what we have been doing since 2018. And the first couple of first summits took place in Washington D.C. area where I live most of the time. And then we started traveling to other places. To last year we were at Pennsylvania Glencairn Museum, the magical Glencairn Museum, and then previous year we were at New York Fashion Institute of Technology. So this year, 2025, hopefully we will be again at the FIT, Fashion Institute of Technology, for 2 days, 23rd and 24th of October in 2025. And and it will have some presentations and some workshops and participatory, experiential learning opportunities, and just, just great community to support each other in this type of work, which we all need around this time. And, just to be there, to be in the same room and doing the things that we love and we know that they're important. And if I may, I would like to also mention that, so after designing for empathy book, I'm now working on the third book, which is the culmination of, if I count my experience, lived experience in 2006, in 2026, hopefully this book, the third book, will come out. And it is going to be sort of like a toolkit for empathy building through museums, where there will be 25 ideas, implementable ideas of, program ideas, essentially, where, specialists in their areas, they described how to repeat them, or how to, you know, they share the creative process behind each of those ideas, so people can just read and get inspired and create their own versions, or go somewhere else entirely new with that. So that is the first time we actually will have some ideas with step-by-step instructions, which apparently most of the people really appreciate. So
Uh, I know we can sometimes be in the clouds and be up,
I know.
which is beautiful. But yeah, sometimes people just want some practical, how do I do this? And or how do I know what to do, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm so excited for that toolkit for that book.
Thank
Um,
you.
and I'm so looking forward to the summit. There is something for those of you who have not experienced um, when you find like-minded people, other empaths, other highly sensitive beings in the world. Um, and Elif and I have had the pleasure, I've had the pleasure, I'll speak for myself, of being in community and communing with her, but just online. And I cannot wait, Elif, to just give you a hug and look you in the eyes. And there's something magical, right, about when you find your tribe and coming together in that way. And so if any of you, if you resonated with something you've heard in our conversation, you got a taste, you're like, I want more. I'll leave in the description box below how to register for the summit. And also, I'll leave Elif's website so you can go and just get even more information about the incredible work that she is doing. I feel like that practical thing we just talked about jokingly is something that actually I would love to maybe wrap this conversation up with, which is what is something, and again, it might be a question. I find questions to be a beautiful way to then uncover answers for ourselves. But what's a question or what's a practice that somebody who's listening to this conversation can do? I also believe that, humanity begins at home, the home of our bodies, the home that we create, and then we take that home out in the world, and that's how we create, I believe, world peace. How do we begin at home? What is something on a personal level that we can do to design empathy for ourselves in our personal lives? And then, because of all that's going on in the world, of course, what is something, Elif, you think that we can do, or a question we can ask, or a practice we can start playing with that can help us design empathy on a communal and community level?
Mhm. You know, I do feel strongly that this is the time where we each should dig deep to our roots and find out what really, really resonates with our hearts, and bring that to surface in whatever form or shape or, means uh, it may be. Because I think that the challenges of our world really is guiding us in a way, one of those guests, rather difficult. They can be difficult, but they force us to really go deep within, as Rumi says, to the root of ourselves,
Mm,
and see what lies there in whatever path, whatever tradition, whatever language, whatever form of beauty, art, music, dance, poetry, painting, walk in nature, listening to birds, whatever. Really try to connect with our hearts, and try to bring that to life, live that ourselves. And just by living it, being an example of it to others around, immediately around us, and not waver, don't fear, no fear in this. This is how we are made. This is this is the universe that is made of love, and it is going to prevail ultimately. And these are, birthing pains and necessary pains that we are going through. It is important to personal experience, speaking from personal experience, it's important to find community in those practices, trusted folks where you can, where one can be heard without judgment, when one can be held without judgment. And and if we need that place, we need to find our place, with trusted folks around us, or just by being with our heart. But then also imagine that there are others who are also sharing the same need. What can we each do to create spaces for non-judgmental coexistence, just being in the same space without judging others? What does that look like? And there are many paths, there are many, traditions of wisdom that explored this as long as humanity have existed. My background is, as I explained, I grew up in Turkey. So my worldview is highly influenced by Sufism, which is, you don't have to be a Muslim to become a Sufi. It could be, Sufism is basically looking for the truth with a capital T under the many
Mhm.
T's that we see. And so it could be in anything, any path. Just walk in nature could be a Sufi in nature, or the natural Sufism or something like that. I don't want to make up, terms now, but I hope it is understandable that I'm just referring to just going back to your own heart. It is there's a reason that we each are here at this time in the universe, and our diversity is our strength, and the universe is waiting for that diversity to fully manifest and do its magic, because that's where it lies, I think. And I hope that makes sense, but that's what how I feel. Just feel connected to the heart and to people, who believe in these things, these values, these qualities, and collaborate without fear, um, and see where we may land.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Elif. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this chance. It is just, it's always lovely to speak with you, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity to think out loud, some of the things that we have been exchanging for some time. But this was also very, very lovely and beautiful, and I hope it will be meaningful for others as well.
May it be so. May we all connect to our hearts and help each other home. Thank you for this communion. We don't see one another, but we're all here in communion. We all here, as Elif said beautifully, getting to the roots, to the root, to the root, to the root, which is love, which is oneness. And if something of this conversation lit you up, please express that, give some support, share it so that this ripples out and can touch more and more people. Again, to remind you, I will leave links to Elif's work below and to her summit. And it would be a joy to gather with you in New York if it calls towards you, calls to you. And as always, so, so, so much love. Thank you and take care.